Okay. All right. Well, we are live here from Spark TV, and we have the Harness sisters here, Rachel Harness, Elizabeth Harness. How are you two doing today?
Doing great. Well, I'm doing great. I can't speak for both of us.
Doing, I'm doing okay. My college is under a attack at the moment, so
Oh,
we're
Oh,
thriving over here.
thriving, possibly
right.
survive. That's
Yeah,
if it's all.
yeah.
Hopefully, it's well, yeah, yeah. You keep us updated on that, and I hope that things go all right. All right with that. Looking, looking then. At how things have kind of developed. You two came up, together with this project of the
Hmm.
Monty Arlott problem. Where did that come from? How did this start out? And Elizabeth, you were the writer, right? So
Yeah.
as far as that goes, so I suppose did it start with you? Was it an idea that you tossed around that you kind of wrote out, or what was that like?
Well, the idea for the story of it and the idea to make a podcast out of it were two completely separate
Oh,
ideas.
sure.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So Rachel came to me around the time she was getting ready to graduate college and was
Hmm.
like, "Hey, I'm thinking of starting some kind of production company type thing." And I'm in school for creative writing. So she asked if I would be willing to write for it, if I had any ideas. And I had a couple months back had an idea and started writing a stage play. So the first two scenes were originally written as a stage play. And I was like, yeah, I can send you some pages. And from there, I adapted and wrote the rest of it as a radio play.
Sure. And Rachel,
Hmm.
so starting something with a production, company group. What did that how'd that start out? What that look like?
Well, I absolutely stole the idea from you initially after doing work with Red Hawk Radio Theater. I hadn't really heard of the concept of an audio drama
Sure.
before you kind of onboarded me into RRT, and like at the time I was very interested in composing. I have a degree in music. I was getting ready to graduate with my music degree, and I was very interested in composing soundtracks like for film, TV, video games. The issue with that is finding film, TV, video games to compose for, especially when you don't have a lot of experience in that area. So after doing some work with RRT, I kind of figured this is a much more efficient way to get like kind of a storytelling mode that I could write music for. That idea, you kind of create your own opportunities. I was like, why would I bother wasting my time trying to find someone else who's making something and convincing them that I can do the job when I can just make my own thing and do the job. And so I brought, obviously, and Elizabeth was my first thought because she was, as she said, creative writing major. I was like, all I really need is a script.
Right.
And I have a lot of friends in theater. I'm providing the music. I figured I can make my way, make it up as I go with like the audio engineering. All I need is a script to start with. So I texted Elizabeth and I was like, do you want to do this with me? You can start out, do one, see how it goes, and it just kind of kept going from there.
Right. Yeah. And so did the excuse me, so did you already study sound design? What did that how'd that
Absolutely
materialize?
not. No, that was more just a necessary step
Right.
into producing something like this, and it was something I was interested in, wanted to know how to do it, how to get it done. So I was like, well, I can just do it myself.
Yeah. Elizabeth, as far as, a story, creative writing, studying that, And especially when it comes to approaching a medium like an audio drama, and finding a way to tell that story, whether it be through with different ways of exposition, different ways of those sorts of things. What did that look like for you as you kind of found your way into the medium?
So I started this script. I have a background in theater. I've been doing theater since high school. It is my minor in college. So like I'm very oriented towards the stage more than I am like the audio drama format. And I was just a freshman in college when I wrote this. And it was very challenging. Like I took the first couple scenes that I originally wrote as the stage play to a writing club at my school, and I was like, hey guys, I've got this thing, I've got this idea for what to turn it into. I don't really know how to do it. And they gave me we workshopped those scenes and they gave me some feedback and they were really helpful. But a lot of it is it was very difficult to take away that element of having the visual.
The blocking.
Right. Because a lot of theater storytelling comes through the blocking. So you have to figure out ways to show that kind of thing through sound or dialogue. So that was a really big challenge. And I will admit some of that I threw on Rachel with the sound design because in the stage directions, I would just write, and then this happens. And Rachel kind of had to figure out how to do that with sound. But there was a lot where I had to give a very specific idea of what happened. And I kind of was challenging myself to write out what this would sound like and see if people would be able to figure it out from that list of sounds.
Right. And the thing I'd be curious with for that, comparing to theater, and maybe this is just the size and scope of my, actual reading of different scripts. It's been a bit since high school and drama club, but as far as cracking open different scripts and things like that, those tend to be fairly limited as far as the simplicity of the direction, and then that kind of gets left up to the production itself in a lot of terms, right? Was there more to figuring out within the script itself, the finding ways to communicate that action than maybe there would be in a normal stage play?
I think there definitely is, because in a normal stage play, you're right, there's not a lot of stage direction a lot of the time, but that's because there's a lot of implied movement through the dialogue. And when you don't have that visual medium to rely on, I feel like you have to be a lot more specific to give the production what's supposed to be happening. And then as opposed to theater, where the creative interpretation comes from figuring out the blocking, the creative interpretation comes from figuring out the sound design to figure out how to portray that through sound.
Yeah. Rachel, then going into the music of this, finding the shape of what this would sound like. Where do you begin with that? Where do you begin with finding, the sound of something like this?
Well, it definitely begins, of course, with the stage directions that Elizabeth wrote into the script. And one thing that I noticed doing this, I have slightly less of a background in theater than Elizabeth does, but still some. I found I noticed there's less creative interpretation, I feel that comes naturally from the actors. Not that there's none, but when you're on stage, when you're moving through it, sometimes you just do what feels right. Sometimes you just make movement choices that feel correct and then can get interpreted, but you don't really have that in the audio drama format. Those have to come from sound design, and I did find that some of it came from, honestly, so I very much started with the directions that Elizabeth put into the script, going in either trying to get out beat for beat what she'd written in, or she'd written something a little vaguer, also trying to figure out, okay, what does this sound like, thinking it through in my head. And then there were a few places where even just like after editing together most of a scene, come to listen through it and find like, okay, this moment isn't really being portrayed accurately. This isn't really coming through the implied movement that's happening here through sound. But at that point, we're so deep into editing, we're so far past recording. I did a lot of kind of creative finagling with the sounds that I did have, and where can I copy, paste, plug in, re-edit, remix to turn like, okay, they did something kind of similar in this scene and kind of similar in another part in this scene, and I can kind of mix these together to make this, new implied action through sound. So yeah, it was a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
And now, did you do your own Foley, or what was that? What went on there? Yeah, how'd that go?
That was probably the most fun part of the process. I'd say we just got into our parents' basement with a bunch of random stuff, random props, and just started throwing things around, hitting things with other things. We did all of our own Foleys, and that was a ton of fun. We got a couple of the other actors in on that too. And I know exactly what you're thinking of, Elizabeth, to make you laugh like that.
You forgot the homemade sound booth in the garage, because there's a sound effect in the show of a door breaking down. And we did that by hitting a rotted piece of wood with a hammer. But obviously we didn't want to do that in the basement, because we didn't want to get rotten wood everywhere. So we did that in the garage, but a garage is obviously very echoey. So we set up a cardboard box and sat in that. And I always call that the most redneck recording studio I've ever seen. But
That's great. That's great. Hey, you got to start with the redneck recording studio. Yeah, that's absolutely. Excuse me. And as you get into the story, then Elizabeth, as far as finding this story, where did that particular story begin? There's a lot going on in this, in terms of cultural clash, in terms of a family story. Yeah, what would that look like for you?
Right. Well, at the risk of sounding like a woo-woo writer lady, it came to me in a dream. Honestly, by nature of the show, more of a nightmare, really. But that's where the basic concept came from. And then I did some historical research, and I built the story out of that. But the basic premise, being stalked by somebody because of where you live, that came from a dream I had.
Yeah. No, it's kind of funny because the show I was doing just before this one, I was talking with him about that dream, the coming to you in a dream, and so there's a through line here. Maybe I'll get one tonight. And I'll find something, my golden storyline. But no, that's interesting. That's really interesting. And what, as far as and again, going back to that about the medium of audio, and the psychological thriller aspect to it, when it comes down to the dialogue being such a big part, the actions of the characters being such a big part of how the plot line plays out, and and the questions of deception and what can you trust. How did you find that as far as the writing process goes? What did that kind of, I suppose, mean in terms of writing for audio about these things, like the psychological thriller components?
I think it takes a lot more like clever wordplay and very careful like finagling of the specific words that are being used, because it's not like a visual medium where you can have an effective jump scare, you know? The thriller and the scary stuff has got to come from like the audience seeing something that the characters aren't. Primarily like the audience seeing things that June isn't, but also not taking it so far that he seems like clueless or, your classic open the door that obviously shouldn't be opened horror film protagonist. So there's a lot of like double meanings in the lines and careful, careful choices being made to make it clear to the audience without making it clear to the characters.
Sure. And with that, when you look at this script and I guess really boil it down, because we haven't spoken too much about what it is. If you were telling somebody at basic what the script is about, how would you summarize it? How would you lay it out there?
I think the elevator pitch I usually give when people ask about it is a girl inherits her grandmother's house and her grandmother's stalker.
That's good.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good.
You haven't told me that. You should have told me that a long time ago. I would have used that too. I always go with a psychological thriller about a woman who, again, inherits her grandmother's house and it is kind of like, I never use the word stalked. I don't know why, but being kind of terrorized by the man who terrorized her grandmother before her. You should have told me that. That's a much more succinct and captivating way to put it. That really grabs you.
It's got a very good film poster ring to it, you know.
Yeah.
It it lays out there and then clinches you there at the end. But Rachel, as far as the score goes for figuring that out, what you draw on in order to, to bring it to this story, to the kind of genre storyline type of story that you're working in here.
Well, it definitely took some finagling, some experimentation, and what I eventually landed on is I knew from the beginning that I wanted to use the violin sound a lot, and so you hear a lot of strings, a lot of violin throughout the whole production. Because, I don't know, something about the story just gave me, like, kind of an old, not necessarily an old-timey feel, but, it's about old things. It's about the old ring, the old house, the old man. And it almost has that sense of, like, perverted nostalgia to it.
Sure.
And so, from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to really prominently feature strains, just because, not that strains have a perverted nostalgia to them, but people tend to associate stringed instruments with like classical music and therefore old music, and like I feel like we've all heard our elders talking about classical music, or it seems like something for grown-ups. You get the image, the stereotype of like little old ladies going to the symphony.
Right.
So I don't know, something about that just seemed to fit. But there was definitely some experimentation before I really committed to that sound. I knew I wanted it to be part of it, but there was definitely some experimentation before I really committed to it, which you can really hear in the first scene. Honestly, if I could go back, I would redo that first scene. You can hear there are a lot of different sounds, different like feels of music coming in. There's one point where I even use synth for a short time. Um, and it, and I think scene one was the first scene that I added music to, and it kind I hate to say that it kind of shows, but uh, no, but shortly after that, like, I got eventually, I think where it really settled in is, I think it's scene four, maybe it's scene three. I don't know. The scene where Monty comes over for tea and there's this really tense argument about ownership of the ring. And I think that was the scene that really locked in the sound of the whole show for me. Because that whole scene is scored with just a string quartet.
Sure.
And something about it just clicked with me, and I was like, this is the sound, this is the one, this is the energy I need to be bringing to the whole rest of the show. And the rest of it just kind of came together. That was the scene that really brought it together, like, yes, this is the sound I want.
Sure. I know for sure. And no, I think you're, that it reflects Monty so well in terms of the the sourness of the strings and especially when it comes to this sense of refinement that he has built up for himself, and yet the toxicity underneath of that, in which he uses this gentlemanliness to kind of bludgeon your sense of reason to the point where you don't know what's real. And so there's a lot of that to it that it reflects so well in the music. And so I think with that, do you and another of these questions about this specific technique of audio drama, when it comes to scoring something that is already purely audio, do you think of that as being something different itself when it comes to to matching the audio, or comes to being a piece of a work that is already audio? Of course, music occupying a different space from other sounds, but yeah.
I think scoring for an audio drama specifically is really kind of the same as scoring for any other, like, play, film, soundtrack, whatever, but more in that the purpose of music in any kind of storytelling like this is to enhance the story beats, bring them through. The music shouldn't so much stand on its own as it should enhance and highlight what's going on in the plot, in the dialogue. It should make those moments, your big moments, feel more profound. And I feel like it plays an even bigger role in an audio format like this, because there are several different things that go into making a play or anything, any kind of production, feel profound and intriguing and engaging. And one of those things is dialogue, which we have in an audio drama. One of those things is physical acting, though, like the look of it. What are your actors acting out? What are they saying with their body language? It can be through the visual set, and those are things that audio drama lacks. So to make up for those missing pieces that might help you get your point across, get your mood across in a visual medium, in an audio medium, you have to get those things from your music and just your pure voice acting, as well as sound design. So I think, like, all of those things, voice acting, music, sound design, those are all important things in any kind of visual media too. But they really have some slack to pick up once you're missing, like, the body language and the visual part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Elizabeth, there's as far as, like, the building up of this conflict, this this question of what's real, what the characters will do with what they think is real. And of course, it been, spoilers and all that. Don't want to go there necessarily. Of course, unless you want to go there, we'll issue the warning. But as far as like, was there an obvious end to how you resolve something with the stakes being where they are in this story as it plays out?
I mean, I felt when I was writing it, there was only one way the story could end. There was only one way it was going to come to an end, with one specific event at the end. I had to have that, but the rest of that, tying it all together, was something I had to play with a lot. Like the original script had a completely different ending from the one we ended up producing, and bringing it all together. You go through so many drafts. My particular method of writing, I write the first draft and then I completely rewrite it for the second draft. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into pulling it all together and making a cohesive story, while also like there's got to be the subplots in there and everything to like make it a full story. So I think that was something that I think I grew a lot during the process of writing this in that particular regard. Because as I said before, I was a freshman in college when I wrote this. I had no idea what I was doing. So it was really a big learning process. And pulling it together and resolving everything in a way that felt believable and true to the story, while also not like tying it up a little too neatly, was a really interesting process to go through.
Right.
You talk about growing as a writer through doing this, and I just want to speak on like I saw it happen in real time. We had a time where very unfortunately our audio files for one of the actors got corrupted. It was unusable. We had June's lines, the main character, we had to go in and re-record everything, and like we still had the files, but the audio was just so bad, and I was trying to fix it in post, and I was trying so hard, and I finally texted Elizabeth. I was like, I can't do this. It has to go. We have to re-record everything. So I had to set it up with Sarah, our actress, and Elizabeth was like, oh, well, if we're re-recording, I'm redoing some things. And she was like, she took the script and she was like marking things out and writing them in. Like, if we're going to redo this, I'm going to fix some things.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it was, what, like 6 months, a year after the initial record?
Sure.
At least that long. And now we're almost 2 years out from the initial record, and I listened back to it, and I mean, we are all our own harshest critics, but I listened back to it and I'm like, I would have changed this line and I would have done this differently. And it's just something you go through, especially when the process is this long, and you're in a period in your life where you're a young creative who is growing a lot every single day, every single week. I think that's just a natural progression of it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh, what was I going to say? The one thing that did come to mind with that was that, remember Dick Cavett asking Orson Welles once if he thought that Citizen Kane was his greatest film, and he said, no, but my next one is, and, or, what is the greatest film of all time? I think he asked it that way as opposed to his own respective one, but my next one is the greatest film of all time. No, absolutely. And I think that that's a big part of it. Was there anything else as far as, the time aspect of getting this, completed and out there that you kind of reflected on in terms of where it started as opposed to where it ended up, going, and where it ended up forming into, that, you mentioned, of course, the reflecting on, how you wrote it and so forth. Was there anything else that you all reflected on with that? But
well, it sure did take about 4 times as long to pull together as I thought it was going to be. We recorded with the cast in June of 2021, And, they were asking at the end of it, oh, when can we expect to see it out? And I was like, oh, I think we can get it out by like November, maybe December. And here we are, over a year and a half later, just publishing. I definitely, like me personally, I definitely underestimated the amount of time and effort that would have to go into it and how difficult it is to fit that kind of thing around, like a full-time job and, day-to-day life when this isn't the main thing you're doing every day. No one's paying me to do this. I still have to go out and go to work and make money to put gas in my car. Right. So it definitely took a lot longer, and which in an optimistic way, is a much longer period of time to grow and learn things.
Yeah.
And really work it over. But it also meant that like by the time we got to the point where we were almost ready to publish, I was like, like the day before, I was listening through the whole thing just to check for mistakes, any last minute tweaks. And I was like Elizabeth said, noticing things like, oh, I edited this scene a year ago, and now looking back at it, like I should have done this differently, played with this audio mixing differently. But, there comes a point where you have to just be done with it, publish it, get it out there. And I think the thing about that is you're never going to stop growing as a creative. You're never going to stop learning. So if you wait to get your projects out there until you're good enough, you're never going to hit that peak. So if you're waiting until like you reach some goal of proficiency, of competence, you're just never going to get where you want to be, because it's always going to be the next thing. You're always going to be growing. So eventually you just have to put it out there, and then all those things you learned, all those things you wanted to do differently, do them on the next one. Yeah. Make the next one better.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. And I feel like, it's really that, I feel as though you've, been like, it's like gone through the fire now, the being forged with that. That, and I believe that you and I have chatted about this before, but it seemed as though with college, even though that everything seemed to be going on, and you've got all these commitments, whether it's other, extracurriculars or grades to keep up, having a life in general, it's like, even still, it seemed like that allowed you to be much more productive, and still, like, your like time, I think, was individually more productive. At least it feels that way for me now that I'm all the time talking to you about different things. I'm hoping 2 years to finish any of them. I'm hoping that would be great, but to have them done before I die, that'd be another that'd be good in general. But yeah, it's I don't know, that time thing of the 40-hour work week to me may be the real killer in a lot of ways that I have found. But so that perhaps thing, but that may be it. As far as the directing of it went, which one of did you both direct? What did that look like?
We really co-directed because at the point that we were like recording, I feel like that was especially the point where Elizabeth, her script, her creative vision, she knows what she wants narratively out of it. I did more of the technical things, so I kind of had more of the vision of what that was going to look like technically and how it needed to come together on the back end. And it definitely took both of us co-directing, working off of each other to keep that cohesive and to make sure it was all going to come together in the end.
For sure. All right. Yeah. Did you either of you have anything else that you wanted to mention about the story, about anything today before we wrap up?
I mean, it's really just, it's been a wild ride, but it's been a pleasure. And honestly, I feel so much more accomplished after having done it. Elizabeth and I've kicked around a couple ideas of like, what's next? What are we going to do next, if anything? Do we want to keep doing this? Do we want to try other things. So it's honestly, for me at least, it's kind of a relief. Like, after going into this with the expectation of I would have it turned around in 6 months, and then it took nearly 2 years, it's kind of a relief to have, like, oh, I get to start something new now.
Yeah.
Personally.
No, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I gotta tell
There's-
you. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
There's always the question, what's next? You know, we were home for Easter a couple weekends ago, and our family has known about this the whole process, and they knew the original, like, it's going to be ready in 6 months. So for the past 2 years, we've been getting, when is it coming? When is it coming? When is it coming? And then finally over Easter, we were like, it's coming on Friday. And they were like, great, what are you doing afterwards? And it's just, our dad said something along the lines of, you had your whole life to do the first one. You have 6 months to put the second one out. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a wild ride. Like Rachel said, it's not what we expected, but it's also very gratifying, especially as a writer who has written lots of things, lots of different scripts, or at least started lots of different scripts, to have something finished and complete come of one of them and actually hear it the way it was written to be. So that's been a really cool experience for me personally as a writer.
I mean, anyone who's like spent any significant amount of time in creative pursuits knows that you have hundreds of unfinished projects in the back closet, and for every one finished project you have a dozen more that I see the pained look on your face. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But no, so it is gratifying, like Elizabeth said, to have, even to just get one out, to know, like, you can do it. Sometimes, you have all these half-finished, started, unfinished projects, and I mean, for me personally, at least, sometimes it feels like, well, is this even worth my time if I can't even finish something? But the truth is, every single creative professional out there has an incredible catalog of things left undone, because that's how we practice, really. I feel like most creative professionals, most people who do creative pursuits, tend to see every project as a final project, as something that should be completed, be finished, be, like an example of our work, when realistically, that's just practice.
Yeah.
We are no different from athletes in that, we have to practice our craft, we have to make ourselves stronger, and that's what those unfinished pieces are, and that's perfectly fine. But, eventually you do finish one, and it's very gratifying, and you gotta, like, hold on to that hit of dopamine when you get it.
That's exactly it. And it's really that there's a real, how do I want to put it? A kind of, I don't know that double-edged sword is the right one, but there's a kind of like, I was gonna say, dropping and trying to catch a blade, but I don't know why I don't know why I'm being so gruesome. I don't know that that's a metaphor at all. But basically, you're wrestling with the fact that you only plunge yourself into something because you have that dopamine hit, because you're falling in love with this idea, and at the same time, you've got to have some sense of, like, well, I can't do them all, so there's just trying, I guess there's no safe in investing yourself in anything. So it's kind of one of those things where I guess let the cards fall where they may in terms of whether it works out or not. But that's that's the story I guess we've all got to grapple with. But no, yeah, absolutely great thoughts here. And and so folks can check out the Monty Arlott Problem at Rosebriar Stories, right? Yeah.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
we're on YouTube and Spotify.
Good deal. All right. Well, we've been speaking with Elizabeth Harness and Rachel Harness. They are behind the audio drama, the radio play, whichever way you want to slice it, the story, the Monty Arlott Problem. And thank you both for being here. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right, yeah, and to our audience as well, thank you all for being here, and hope that you will enjoy and take some reassurance with you as you look at your probably vast catalog of works in progress too, and well, have a